So welcome to this video. As a personal note before I begin, I'd like to talk about three things mostly. First of all is that I won't be editing this video too much heavily because it's really long, and so I prefer just to release it with a very minimal style, and so it's even better to have it on your back while watching something else. Second of all is I won't be putting any footage of Araki on screen because they personally asked us to not record Araki in any shape or form, and I'd like to honor these wishes. Third of all, I hope you enjoy the video. Oh yeah, and obviously there will be spoilers of everything in JoJo to the current chapter of JoJolion, so be warned of that. Every year around the end of October and beginning of November, the Tuscanian town of Lucca becomes home to the second largest comic convention in the world, Lucca Comics and Games. Within the walls of the original historical town, this convention occupies squares, alleys and parks as the backdrop of its many events and booths, and even local shops adapt their interiors to the festivities, some to different extents. The important thing is that this year, 2019, the author of JoJo's Bizarre Adventures, Hirohiko Araki, came as a guest and gave out several interviews about his narrative, art and his love for Italy. My idea in this video was to do a quick recap of things that were discussed and other JoJo related events. Also, I will be referring to Hirohiko Araki as Araki, because in Italian we can use maestro, but in English if we call him master it sounds a bit weird. The first interview was on the first day, and when I arrived there was a huge line of people who already got a ticket, and to get this ticket you had to go in the morning, so I couldn't get in. So instead of that I went to the Star Comics booth. Star Comics is the company that releases JoJo in Italy, but I'll get to that later. For now I will recap what was said in the Araki interview. My sources are tweets of people who attended and what the press released. So on the morning of the 30th of October, there was the first interview. When asked about his creative process for character design, Araki says that he gets inspiration walking around during his everyday life when he sees people acting, dressing or appearing in a way that catches his eye, to which he sometimes asks if he can take photos of them. To this he adds that sculptures of classic period are also an inspiration. When asked about the reception of Araki's Western classic influence style in Japan, he said that his style has always been liked because it's the style that always felt the most natural to him. Thanks to that he can make high quality artwork without getting tired of them. He adds that his greatest inspiration are classic art museums and his many trips to Italy he has done during his life. They asked him what may have been the Olympic Committee's thought process when choosing him to do the 2020 Paralympics official logo, and if he feels satisfied of what he's done. He's not sure why they chose him, but said it might be that they were impressed by his latest art expositions in Japan. He also said that he can't give concrete thoughts on his work at this point, since he still hasn't finished it. When asked on the inspiration behind Jonathan Joestar, he said that his name was taken from an American-style chain restaurant present in Japan called Jonathan's Family, which he's very fond of. Aesthetically, he said he wanted to show the most macho character possible with the classic statue's proportions. He was asked what did he have in mind for the future of the series now that JoJolion is ending, and he answered that he still hasn't thought about it too much yet, but we'll get to this around later. When asked if he ever read superhero comics and if they inspired his works, he answered that he doesn't read them that much because the characters always seem to him as very self-centered, melodramatic and kind of unreachable, while he likes characters that stand with their feet on the ground more. Between them, the only one that he really likes is Spider-Man. He also adds that he never got the chance to read American hero comics, as his teenager formation was mostly relative to the French comic scene. When asked about what kind of film would he do if he got a chance to collaborate with a director, he didn't talk about directors, but said that he would like to make a horror film, a realistic one. He also confessed to be the Walking Dead fan, citing it as an example of a grounded horror. When asked about Fugo's disappearance from the story, he explained that since Shonen Jump's audience was composed by teenagers, which are in an age when betrayal is not well seen, he preferred not to involve the character any further, since it could have ruined the character for many readers. When asked why he decided to reset the universe at the end of Stone Ocean and restart in a new one, he answered that it was a hard decision for him, but that he felt that the story reached its natural conclusion and it would have been counterproductive to go further. Abandoning so many familiar characters was hard, but the spirit was reborn in merry characters for later parts. When asked what has changed and what has stayed the same in JoJo, he said that undoubtedly he changed a lot, but even if story and characters are always different, the common thread of spirituality, heart and ideals that gets passed down from ancestor to their successor is present in the protagonists that are moved by the same convictions that pushes them for future generations, and for the spirit that will be passed to posterity. In this sense, Jonathan's death is only figurative, as his spirit will live eternally in his descendants. When asked how the powers of a stand are born and how they connect to the characters, he answers that stands are a manifestation of the hearts and spirit of the users, like guardian spirits that incarnate the most profound characteristics of the self. Even if not visible to the naked eye, the soul of the will of JoJo's characters are so strong that they can manipulate reality. When asked why time is so important to him, to a point that a lot of the main antagonists have time-related abilities, he answered that the ability to manipulate time and its flow is for him the strongest ability there is, and he gave them these abilities to these characters to make clear the levels of power. When asked what was the inspiration behind Yoshiki Akira, he answered that he tried to imagine what would happen if his neighbor would suddenly reveal himself as a serial killer. What would he have to do to blend in society? What would his hobbies be? His habits? He finds Kira interesting as a character because he embraces his nature instead of running away from it, and only tries to live a criminal but quiet life. He also added that he got a lot of documentation study and read a lot of assassination novels. And after that he laughed. When asked who are his favorite stylists at the moment and if he plans to do more collaborations like the Gucci one he did, he said that for now he hasn't planned any collaborations while he's working on the Paralympics work, but said that when he was young he really liked Versace's style with its pins and decorations. He also thanks Gucci for the collaboration. When asked about his favorite character, he confirmed he is still Shigechi and that he is nothing like Rohan. Since both Araki and Haruki Murakami frequently use music in their narratives, they asked him if he finds common elements in his work process of works. He answered that he really doesn't know the creative process of Murakami, but that in his case, re-listening to music is a common daily thing, but again, he doesn't know if Murakami also does it. He also added that he really likes Puccini and that he already came to Lucca for a concert before. When asked why Dio came back so many times during the series, he answered that Dio is one of the strongest characters in the series. He's a character that strikes fear as he doesn't have remorse or sense of responsibility. He is the antithesis of a Joestar family, and so he created Dio as something hereditary to the Joestar family, in a manner like a curse. He's so strong that he can't die easily, and especially in Japan, the concept of his resuscitation makes him even more frightening. This was the first interview, which was press only. In the Giulio Theatre, a couple of hours later, there was a second interview, this time with the fans, and it started with moderator's questions. Since this is a talk show, the first question will obviously be how JoJo was born. Araki responded that the idea that gave birth to JoJo was that he wanted to put on paper someone's powers that are not usually drawn. He transformed them into images in Shonen Jump and chose the name JoJo's looking for an assonance. JoJo within its themes has talks about humanity, destiny and fate, and the immortality of the human soul. Why is Araki so attached to these and why did he choose them? Araki responded that he was told to draw something on that lines, but he kind of noticed the profundity of his characters, the admiration of the humans and other themes of destiny when he was actually later on during the series. He adds that he wanted to represent themes of the affirmation of humankind, not to forget it. They are good and positive people with their nice sides, but they are also negative people with their human and interesting sides. On the same note, the interviewer goes about the various Zeppeli that seem to die a lot, and asks if there's going to be one that avoids this destiny, which the person that does the question finds kind of harsh. Araki answers that he doesn't have any ill will against them, but talks how they complement the Joseph family that helps them reach their goal. He adds that he really likes them because they can pass their values and positivity even in death. On the argument of battles, JoJo has more complex and indirect fighting than other manga. The question is, how does he manage to find and invent new powers and strategies? Araki responds that he gets inspirations from many things, and especially his daily life. When he meets his friends, when he observes his neighbors, when he drinks water and it stays in his throat. He could make an ability out of these things. In essence, the observation of small details is essential to a creative process. Many of the parts in JoJo are essentially travel diaries, which by extension means a wide variety of locations. How much does the setting influence the writing of the work, and how much is it fundamental? Do you start working from there, or is it for added flavor? Araki answers that what inspired him in their creation were his bicycle rides he did as a child. When he was younger, he used to go many times in small travels and visited many places. Mountains, fields, cities. This movement, this traveling, helped him grow and become an adult. For him, the philosophy of traveling as a metaphor of growth is very important because it lets his character grow, from the beginning to the end of his journey. Regarding the second part of the question, he takes Moricho as an example. When he has to face a problem, it is usually faced head-on, openly. But then he asks himself what will happen if this problem, this threat, would be hiding and waiting. Maybe it's the man next door and we don't know. From this idea came out Moricho, having an invisible enemy, beyond suspicion, that waits in the shadows. It was a challenge unlike the writing of a story focused on travel. Still on the argument of Moricho, would Araki live there? The answer is yes. Moricho is based on the place where he was born and raised, and it was full of good people, even if a bit weird. Apparently, he adds, there were some Zeppelis there. On the argument of a creative process, it's common knowledge that he listens to lots of music. It's interesting because rhythm is fundamental for storytelling. So how does music and which kind of music influence his work the most? Araki responds that the thing that inspires him the most is the rhythm itself. There are different types of rhythmics, music styles, and time signatures that influence his work. Music is very important. Last question before the public's turn. What can we expect from JoJo's future? Araki responds that he actually doesn't know, and that when writing JoJo, he always has a clear beginning and somewhat clear end, and all there is a mist all over what's in between. And that is because JoJo's narrative is very spontaneous. Essentially, he has clear idea on how JoJo will end. And now on to the public's questions. As said before, Sensei takes many inspirations from his youth, his travel and life experiences. In Diamond is Unbreakable, there is Keiicho Nijimura's stand, Bad Company, which is formed by many toy soldiers. I remember something similar in a Stephen King novel. Do you get inspiration from horror, cinema and literature? Araki answers that he likes Stephen King stories and that he likes horror films, and he must have taken inspiration even from him. But as for horror as a genre, he finds more inspirations from film like Chucky. I heard that you are the one that decides the JoJo endings. I was wondering if there was an Italian song that you would like to be used as an ending in JoJo. Araki answers that he likes PFM and the opera, in particular Puccini's music. Obviously, he hasn't yet decided on anything definitely. As a side note, PFM is Premiata Forneria Marconi and is a progressive rock band. It's very nice actually. Clothing seems to be one of the most important characteristics in your work. Somewhere inspired by some famous designer's work. So what's your creative process around clothing? Araki answers that clothing should have a common characteristic. They must be comfortable and should facilitate movement. As a base, he used the Japanese school uniform, and from there he starts to move on details like Jonas brooches. A manga that he liked a lot is is Babel II, or Babel Nisei, in which the protagonist goes to desolate places like deserts in his school uniform on. He found that fantastic and very inspiring, and he always liked to make characters have their school uniforms in location like these. When he did, he was moved. As a side note, Babel II will be talked about later on, but an interesting thing is that the protagonist is called Koichi. If you could choose a stand ability, what would you choose? Araki answered that he would like to clear the rainy skies, as a person that brings good weather is said to be nice, and then he laughed. Talking about remaining human and the value of humanity, don't you think that the punishment received by Diavolo to be a bit harsh, even for him? Araki answered, not really, as Diavolo is so evil and he brought so much suffering that it was the only way he found he could get rid of him. He's sorry for his fans though. Adding a personal note to this, and I promise I will make less, Diavolo's demise connects in different ways to the different circles of hell as created by Dante Alighieri in his Inferno. At this point, the interviewer stepped back for the last question of the day. He asked if Araki sees himself in some of his characters. Araki, after laughing, answered that it's not Rohan, which is something he aspires to be like. That said, he doesn't feel like there is a character that is similar to him, but if he had to choose one with things like him, he would say Shigechi. Is there a story or an anecdote of the creation of JoJo he would like to share today? Araki talks about when he wrote for Shonen Jump, as he was given 19 pages for his manga. The problem was that he always ended up with 21, and so he had to take out 2 pages, and not pages that will move over to the next chapter, but definitive cuts that will never be shown in the manga. Luckily, now that he publishes on Ultra Jump, he has 45 pages assigned to him a month, which sometimes are a bit too much. The last question is, if you could go back to the day you started working on JoJo, what would you change or correct? Araki answered that he would correct elements of grammar, like some words that change between spoken and written word. So this was the first interview of the convention. As I was saying before, while these interviews were going on, I was in line for the special JoJolians they had. At a point, the line was interrupted because they finished the day's batch of copies, but I managed to get a couple later in the evening. A cool thing that happened though is that while waiting for friends, Hirohiko Araki passed me by, and I mean like 3 meters distance, like I could reach him. Inside the Start Comics booth, there were a lot of different manga, but especially JoJo. There was a small exposition for Sailor Moon too, which was cool. On the next day, I woke up early to get in line for the ticket to get in the second Araki interview. And there I learned that somewhere else there was another line for another interview. Both interviews' tickets were over before the opening of the ticket counter. So I moved to a deconsecrated church for another event. So this is what Master Araki said in his first interview of the 31st of October, which was more focused on his drawing style. So this is a recap of what Araki said in his first interview, which was more focused on his drawing. He has no interest in learning to draw digitally, not because he's against it, but because it will be troublesome learning how to do now. He feels neutral about it. He used a Japanese brush, a pen, and markers to draw. He didn't say the brand names because they're not sold outside of Japan. The pen's flow looked like a rapid pen with a thick tip. After making the bull and cross, he draws eyebrows first, and the nose, eyes and mouth in this order. When talking about his routine, he has a regular rhythm of work. He sleeps 8 hours every night and has 2 days off in a week. Routine and rest are important for the quality of the work and for the health. He and his editors repeated this many times during the conference, so it's important. About developing a style, he said it's a long and difficult process. His first influence was Yokohama Mitsuere, who worked on Tetsujin 28 Go, Babel Nisei, which is Babel II, which inspired some visual for Stardust Crusaders, as we already mentioned before, and also did Mars. Before working on JoJo, he took inspiration mainly from other manga. Then he started looking at things outside that world and outside of the ordinary. The poses in JoJo have been inspired at the beginning by a trip in Rome, during a trip to the Museo Borghese, where he fell in love with the Bernini sculpture of Daphne and Apollo, particularly by the body's twisting. Style is important for manga. In Japan, people read manga on trains. If you can recognize what they are reading from afar, that means you have developed a mature style. When it comes to drawing, he didn't know who to draw at first. He started thinking about the one who would make the public the happiest. So he drew Mr. But he said that Bucciarati was a close second. After Mr. he did Giorno because he's the protagonist, and also he said that he and Mr. go well together. But then decided to add Bucciarati for the fans anyway. And this is what basically went down during the first interview. While it was going on, I managed to attend the JoJo Pose Academy thing. It was okay. It was in the same church where Araki held the penultimate interview, in which he went over his appreciation of Italian style and craft and answered some questions. So now I'll be going in the Q&A form. Sorry if I keep changing the format, but it took days to write these notes. What do you think of Lucca? I came here 10 years ago to see Puccini's birthplace and area. I'm really happy to be in this splendid town, meeting all of you. Vintoraro is based in Italy. Why is this so? I love Italy and love coming here. This is the first reason. It might be a bit common, but of Italy I like the museums, the films, the food. In short, I kind of love everything here. What were the things you concentrated on the most to translate Italy into comics? Well, clearly I love the food too. The squid ink spaghetti, so dark and so black, made me real curious. I also like cooking, I really do. So it's now that I ask you to give me recipes and suggestions. I will really appreciate it. For example, in the spaghetti with oil, garlic and chili pepper, how should I handle the garlic? In cubes? Or should I cut it? Should I press it? It's important, I really need to know. For example, I put it in pieces, but then I put in some dashi, which is a Japanese broth. In response to this, the Italian public answered with screams of shock for such scandalous propositions. So you don't even put the butter? The response were cries of indignation. Oh, sorry. And the salt? Is the salt okay? Right? As a side note, the tone of the interview was very light-hearted, so the reactions of the public that were not violent at all, even though Araki was attacking our pride as people. At this point, another question came in. So at this point, we are obliged to ask you this. How much do you cook the spaghetti? 8 minutes. Will I be able to cook a good meal? I do not know at this point, but I try. I like to prepare many things, actually, with bottarga and tomato sauce. The moderator suggested to try out cacio and pepe. Yes, in any case, I like to put all of this in my manga. Regarding the city of Naples, what can you say? What do you think of it? Why did you start from here, and what is your relationship with pizza? I chose it because there are beautiful places like Pompeii. For me, it was the right place to start a journey. I visited it, obviously. In regards of pizza, do you mean the thin one or the one with the tall edges? In any case, I don't know how to cook it. Capri is connected to the good life. Did you manage to live it? The good life is la bella vita, and is an Italianism to talk about like opulence and abundance. To be honest, the thing that fascinated me was that Emperor Tiberio had a house there, a place of repose and resting. He didn't trust who surrounded him, so I found sad this contrast of living in such a beautiful place while being so isolated. Pompeii is one of the few places that still conserves original paintings from the time. As an artist, what did you get out of it? It fascinates me greatly. It was brought back in its entirety after the eruption of the Vesuvius. It has a mysterious atmosphere and it's a beautiful place to use as a location. Florence and the art of Michelangelo. His sculpture work with massive muscles. What do you think? In this case, we can talk about JoJo poses. For me, the meaning of a pose is that of a shape that remains impressed in your mind. I study Bernini's Daphne and Apollo and so on. What impresses me and like to see more than anything is the torsion of the body in every way. What can you tell us about Venezia? They told me that there are stairs where people sit to relax. I asked myself, why? What are they doing? It's an Italian thing. They lose time, as we say it. So they don't read manga. So if you don't read it in the open, where do you read it then? We usually read them at home, It's more of a private thing, let's say. Then, from today onwards, you have a mission. Read manga in the open. About the Costa Smeralda, another place that represents Italy's opulence. In Vinto Aureo, it doesn't appear that much. Why is that so? It's a beautiful place. For me, it's more for a resort. But at first view, it looks so beautiful that it appears as an immense world of fantasy. Mysterious. It inspires me. Have you tried Sardinian food? Yes, and obviously it's delicious. The love that you have for Italy and your Italian public is evident and reciprocated. How would you explain this alchemy? I don't know the reason actually, but I don't write my manga so that they can be read with a public in particular. I try to represent the beauty and sadness of the human life, and the fact that there is someone that appreciates my work is wonderful to me. I've been drawing manga for 30 years, but now it is I asking you what fascinates you of them. As a personal note, and since Araki just asked, I think one of the reasons why Part 5 especially is so appreciated in Italy is that for one of the first time in media history, Italy is represented with some sort of respect of it, an actual appreciation for its culture and locations. But I don't know, it's just me. In regards to Italian fashion, JoJo oozes Italian fashion and your ideas of aesthetic from every pore. What is your relationship with fashion? Yes, Italian fashion. I like this classic and traditional style, but as with fashion, even buildings and structure have this aura. Some even are still from the age of ancient Rome. It is us to thank you for representing and making eternal all of this in JoJo. The interview then moved to questions from the public. We would suggest this dish to Master Sensei. Spaghetti alle vongole, which is clam spaghetti. Do you put white wine in it? No butter? No. No butter. As a side note, to make spaghetti more digestible, we put olive oil. Not too much, but just enough. After Jojorian, could we have another part in Italy? After asking the public if they wanted it, which yes, so that the answer was yes, I should make some research, but I'll try. Then a popular Italian YouTuber called Maurizio Merluzzo got to ask questions. I started reading JoJo in 1999, so it's 20 years for me this year. Like everyone, I appreciated the evolution of the drawing style with time. Even so, why did Jonathan started with a bod in Kenshiro mode and now it looks like a Sailor Moon? Sorry, but in the beginning I wasn't very good at drawing, so now I can do it more proportioned. But it was beautiful. It kind of looked like Sylvester Stallone. Do you have something against the muscles? No, not at all. But you look like someone that has a stand. Can I ask you which one? It's a blender. I'll have ways to explain it later. So what does it blend? Squid ink spaghetti. Can it also make apple juice? So, can I ask if Star Platinum and the world are both Jonathan in different moments of his life? Araki ignored this question and answered, the tanks on its back are to breathe when time stops. Some other person asked, so there's a character Melone that uses the term di molto, which is a thing that people from Florence use. Was this on purpose? It is. I didn't know. Is there a quote that you particularly like in your work? Yes, your mi rifiuto, which in Japanese is kotoaru. So why did you kill some characters in such an unexpected way at times? I'm sorry for that, but it's the most fitting way to conclude the path as a human in most cases. As an example, in the case of Narancia, I wanted to illustrate the sadness of living, of a destiny that is chosen by a context of birth more than less favorable. But when a person has a beautiful sensibility and spirit, it can soar higher from all of it. He died believing in values that were greater from the ones he started from. Those of Bucciarati are tattoos or special clothing. They are parts of the clothing, yes, they're not tattoos. Which Italian artistic movement do you like the best? I heard your quotes about classic art, for example, but specifically which ones? I obviously like the Roman and Renaissance era. As for contemporary art though, I like Giorgio Morandi. Would you like to come back to Italy and Lucca? Which is your favorite city? The Lucca convention is beautiful. Really wonderful in the context of how the town is valorized in its whole. Many influences mixed and this surprises me a lot. If you ask me again, I'll come another time for sure. As for my favorites, I think they are Napoli and Capri. We would like to suggest a typical Naples dish, the macaroni omelette. There are many characters in this series who have an absent parental figure. From what derives this? Orphans interest me very much. In reality, there were many more things I'd like to talk about this argument, but I prefer to cut it out to talk about other things. So this was the end of the last interview. Lastly, there was the last main Araki event at the Lucca main stage. Before his arrival, there was a concert of a band that did covers of Italian openings. Here's some highlights. And then, after a march of cosplayers and the hidden guests in the car, Araki reached the main stage. They asked us not to record it, so I won't show you any footage. But here's what they talked about. So how did you find yourself here at Lucca? I think I should start by thanking everyone. It's been more than 30 years since I've been making manga, and being invited here in this special place, and the fact that all of you like my work is a thing that really makes me happy. We know that this has been the first time you participated at a convention outside of Japan. Did you have any problems? At first, actually, I wasn't sure how much my work would have been received and wasn't expecting to see how much was appreciated here. But when I came here, I really felt the warmth and love from my fans, and I hope to send it back 1,000 times, which is an Italianism. How was the fan reception? You were all very warm. I just wanted to say you're all beautiful. Everyone in the public started to make heart signs, and the Dia cosplayer next to me was melting. The guy asked him again, what did you think of Lucca Comics and his fans? Thanks to Lucca Comics, I heard it has been more than 50 years that this con is going on, and being invited here is lovely. Do you think about coming back to Italy? And if so, where? And as all Italians do, all the people in the public said our town's name. I learned a phrase in Italian, mi rifiuto. He then explains that is a reference to when Rohan refuses stuff. Would you like to give some last words to the fans of Lucca? I'd like to thank you immensely for having invited me in the context of this convention. Seeing you all here makes me really happy to have kept working for 30 years on this manga. So again, thank you, and I hope to see you all again soon. So this was a long one. I hope I did a good job of transposing what happened here, and I hope you appreciated it. I leave you with some last piece of Araki media of this evening. A special message in Italian written by Araki. To my Italian readers, it is truly wonderful that JoJo and their works have been loved for so much time in Italy. One of the places most dear to me. The world of JoJo will still go on for long, and I will be honored if you were to follow it with trepidation. Warm regards, Araki Hirohiko.